Hi, welcome to Teen Craft Corner. I'm Miss Elizabeth from the St. Mary's County Library, and today we are going to make a really cool wall hanging using yarn, and it's going to be dyed with Kool-Aid, so it's going to be an ombre effect on the yarn. So what we're going to start with is a 1-inch dowel rod. So these are pretty easy to get at a craft store. You can get packages of these, and then we're going to need some ivory yarn. You want to make sure that it's wool yarn, so it needs to be like actually wool yarn, not synthetic, not cotton. Make sure it's wool so that it absorbs those dyes like it's supposed to. So what I did before I started any of my dyeing or making the tassels is I made the part that's the hanger. I wrapped one end and knotted it up and kind of measured how long I wanted it to be, cut some extra, and then wrapped and knotted this in. So the next thing that you're gonna need is an 8-inch piece of cardboard. So just off the side of any box, it needs to be 8 inches long. Doesn't matter how wide it is, it just needs to be 8 inches. So then what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our wool yarn, which it needs to be an ivory, just so that whatever color we dye it, it's gonna stand out against this ivory. So then we're gonna start wrapping. So just hold your yarn there on the top of the board, and then you can start to wrap around. Very easy. Now I wrap, I did some other tassels and I wrapped it 50 times. That seemed to be a good amount. All right, so I've reached 50. Now you want to make sure that you stop on the same side that you started at. So I started my wrap here, so I want to end my wrap on that same end, okay? So this is my 50th pull of my yarn, 50 wraps around my piece of cardboard. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut across the top. All right, so now we're going to cut. Just get the scissors all the way up under all of that yarn we just wrapped. I'm just going to cut it. Try to hold it when you cut it so that it doesn't all get away from you. All right, then I've got to cut it away from the ball of yarn. Make sure it's all in there together, sort of even. We don't want uneven pieces. So I've got like this long strand of yarn. All right, so next, get my yarn again. So the next step is to take some more yarn. We're gonna cut a separate string, about 12 inches should be adequate. So I'm gonna cut that off. And then what you're gonna do is you're going to wrap that around the middle of this, and then we're gonna fold it in half around. It's basically gonna tie the center together, and then we're gonna end up with one big grouping tassel of yarn, okay? Okay, so here we are with our group of all of our yarn that we've wrapped, our 12-inch piece of yarn that we've cut. We're gonna wrap that around the middle of this bunch of yarn and then just fold it over here like this. And then what you wanna do is you wanna make a tight knot. So you wanna pull both strings together and knot it around itself and pull it tight down here in the center. Because this is what's gonna fold our tassels in half to make it a nice large bunch of tassels. Now if you have a better way to knot, go right ahead. Despite my Girl Scout training, I am a terrible knotter. All right, so now we've made this tassel, start of a tassel right here. And mine's a little bit uneven, so I'm gonna slide that over a bit so that it's more even. So there we go. The next step that we need to do is cut another section of yarn. Now for this one, you want to cut a much longer length. There's no set requirement. The thing is that we want our tassels to be different lengths when they're hanging from the dowel rod for our wall art. So cut some really long, cut some shorter. Don't do them less than 24 inches. So your smallest length of yarn for this part should be 24 inches, and then you can go up from there. If it's too long, then you can cut it shorter later. It's always better to have too much. So for this part, what we're going to do is lay the yarn underneath the top of our little yarn bundle. So see right up here, we're gonna make, basically, it's gonna end up looking like a little knot at the top. And this will be the finished product of our tassel. It looks sort of like a little ghost to me. I don't know about you guys, but that's what I see. Maybe just because we had Halloween just passed. So now for this, we need to wrap the yarn around. So I like to wrap it several times. Again, you want to pull it nice and snug and just wrap each side around, going opposite directions from each other. And then once you've done that a few times, we're going to create our next knot. Let me find my long side there. Okay, now this is important. You're going to have two parts to your yarn tassel. There's this part where you can see that seam where we folded it together. And then there's this side where it's a nice little ball and you can't see the seam. This is the side where you want to make your knot. So that way when you hang it, you have like a nice, bit, a front and a back. Like this is the bit we're gonna hang. We don't want people seeing that. That looks icky. All right, so we're gonna do just like we did before. Take the two strands together, the two long strands, and we're gonna knot them together with each other. Now on the blog post where I found this, which was One Social Girl, she mentioned weaving the yarn in underneath where you wrapped it around after you knotted it up. I don't think we need to do that. I just knotted it a couple times, gave it a good tight knot, and I think it's pretty secure. Now, you see that we have this really long piece, right? This is where, and mine didn't tie in the right place, this is where it's gonna hang from that dowel rod. And we can make it really long and then cut it to the length we want once we're ready to hang it onto that dowel rod. So this is how we make our tassel. Depending on how long your dowel rod is, mine is, I'm not sure, I think it's about 1 foot long. I'll be able to fit 4 tassels onto mine. Okay, we are ready for step 2 of our craft here, and this is where we're going to dye our tassels. So I have 1 cup of water in a measuring cup. You can do it in a glass bowl, something that's microwavable. I added 1 drop of this dish soap to the water, then I microwaved it for 20 seconds just to get it a tad bit warm. Okay, so we have our 1 cup of water with 1 drop of dish soap in it. We warmed it up for 20 seconds. And now I have a group of one of my tassels sitting in the soapy water. And we just want to soak it up into where we want to have the dye go to. So the soapy water helps the dye hold onto the yarn. So we're going to let that sit for a few minutes. While that's sitting, we're going to take 1 cup of water. We're going to mix a Kool-Aid packet in. We're going to heat that up for 1 minute. And then once the tassels are done in here, we're going to dip it in there. All right, so we've finished soaking our tassel in the soapy water. I'm gonna squeeze that out real quick. We wanna squeeze it dry. So once you've squeezed it out as best you can, then you just wanna grab a paper towel, squeeze it out with that. Try to get it dry, not dry, but not dripping wet. Get the ends too. And now it's time for the dye to dip. I want to keep our tassel at the end to tie it with out of the way. And this is our warm water with the Kool-Aid in it. And we are going to start dipping the ends. So the instructions say to count to 10 for each dip. I have already dipped some of my tassels, so I'm going to try out some different things. You can do that too, experiment. I'm going to hold my ends in there a little bit longer. When you dip the ends in, the dye absorbs, the yarn absorbs the dye further up. So you can see that it's red further up where I haven't even dipped it yet. So it's just absorbing that red dye. So I'm going to dip this now in 2 cups of water. These 2 cups of water I have warmed in the microwave for 25 seconds. Let's rinse this off. And voila. So we've got a red. You can see a little bit of that ombre effect. We're going to lay this out on some paper towels and let it dry overnight. Okay, well, I think we've got some success here. I only did one purple because I poured my dye out before I made another one. I wasn't thinking. I also bought what I thought was a blue Kool-Aid packet because the outside was blue, but it was tropical punch, so it turned out red. So my recommendation is buy lots of colors because even though the outside of the Kool-Aid pack is one color, it might be a different color when you mix it up. So just buy a bunch of different colors and see what you get. So I've got like variations of red here because I tried to do this one a little bit lighter, tried to do this one darker, and then we've got a purple in there, which is in the red family, so that works. So I just tied them up around my dowel rod there. You can glue them if you want to keep them in place, but once you have it up on the wall, nice and straight, it should be fine. You shouldn't need to glue it. So I think it's pretty cool. I cut the edges of this one because the blog site recommended like trimming up the edges, but I kind of like it with like the really tassel-y, crazy edges. If you want to kind of trim those up a little bit, you can, but the straight edge, nah, not so much. Doesn't do it for me. I like these wild and free edges. Thanks for joining us for our Teen Craft Corner.